All right, we are actually recording this time. I'm Rick Moore, MSO News Sports, and I'm so happy that Dr. Sean Bennett of Salem State University has decided to come back after I screwed things up a week or so. Dr. Bennett, welcome to MSO, and how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Rick. Happy to be here. Happy to join you again. Had a wonderful conversation with you. Looking forward to our conversation today.
We did have a good conversation, and I really appreciate that. You taught me a lot, and forgive me for trying to figure out how to see things here. But the main thing I want to get into is you are the vice president of inclusion and diversity at Salem. I may have those backwards, but at Salem State University, which is a position that is so important in today's world, and I want to get into that. But first of all, in reading your biography, Dr. Bennett, amazing. You're an engineer. You're an electrical engineer, and you got into this aspect of education. So please tell us your story on how you went from that aspect of school, maybe from high school on, to where you are now.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's definitely an unconventional path. If you'd asked me 10, 15 years ago if I thought I'd be working in higher ed and in diversity and inclusion, there's no way that I would have said yes. I would have had no idea that my career would take me where it has taken me. I am from a generation of young people that was amongst the first African-American students to go to the engineering institution that I joined as an undergrad. It was far north New York. It's the part of New York State that they refer to as the North Country. So I was amongst the first students there, and in arriving there as a student of color who grew up in Rochester, New York, there really weren't a lot of the services and conversations that take place on college campuses now that work so hard to make people from different backgrounds and experiences feel welcome on campus. So I had the opportunity as an undergraduate engineering student to work in the diversity space and work on a lot of things that would help future generations of college students on that campus feel more welcome, feel better, kind of address some of the unique needs that you might have as someone who's coming into an environment where you were once part of the majority and now part of a gross minority. And through that work, I got very comfortable with community-based organizations and other kinds of events. So when I left my undergraduate institution, I actually had a job as an engineer working at the Xerox Corporation. And there was an after-school program in a city neighborhood run by the Urban League of Rochester. And they went to Xerox and said, we have an after-school tutor program. We need volunteers, and we have no one who can teach math and no one who can tutor physics or chemistry. Is there anyone who's willing to come down and do that? And so by going down and doing that, it really made me fall in love with, it was my first kind of step to falling in love with what education is about, be it K-12 or be it higher ed. And I did that for a couple of years, and it made me go back to school. I was so, moved by the importance of that work. I was so moved by the impact that tutoring work was having on students in that urban neighborhood that I thought, man, this is a place that, as much as I like engineering, I'm just really inspired to do work in that space. It led me then on a journey where I became a certified teacher in the state of New York, eventually certified as an educator as well in the state of Massachusetts. I grew as an educator and to becoming an administrator first, administrator of a couple programs, and eventually a school leader. And as fate would have it, I got very involved in the charter school movement. And by virtue of being involved in the charter school movement, it meant that the school that I was a senior administrator at, the K-12 school that I was a senior administrator at, started to be an intersection point between many universities that were looking to recruit students. We were trying to do really creative, innovative things that made college accessible and made families think college was a possibility for young people. And that actually was my segue more than a decade ago into higher ed, because I had done enough of that work that I was asked by a university president to be one of their inaugural AVPs for diversity and inclusion. So that was actually, engineering took me to K-12. K-12 exposed me to higher ed once again in a very different way. And I've been working in higher ed now for nearly 20 years, and most recently worked as an assistant dean in the College of Engineering Technology at the Rochester Institute of Technology. So my segue to higher ed was really a convergence of my background in engineering and my experience in education. As they thought about what it meant to recruit as an institution for diversity and create environments where students might be successful, they thought having someone in that role who also understood that discipline well was really important. So I have immense gratitude for that opportunity and in the universe for like having me like in the right place at the right time. There was no grand or master plan, but just an intense desire to have a positive impact on community and people's lives.
RIT, that's pretty cool. As an educator myself, it seems to me that you have gotten in the middle of the wave that has come in with respect to diversity and inclusion. When I started in 1971, things were different then. You came into a classroom of students, and I taught in primarily a white community, but I'm an undergrad, and I grew up in a very rainbow type community, and I didn't know about certain things, certain biases, and so on. But as a teacher, I looked at my kids, and they sort of fell into one group. And I didn't have to deal with personal issues. I didn't have to think about what their home life was like. I didn't have to worry about those kinds of things, or so I thought. And then things changed over the years. We became more and more aware of, in terms of what we went through, special needs. And then as populations grew, then we realized there are other people who are a different color than what I was used to, and they have certain things that have to be dealt with as well. So you're in the middle of that wave, but also as a math science person, you're able to I don't say elevate the kids, that's the wrong word, but you're able to look at them from a perspective with your background. So they've all changed, and that brings us to where you are at Salem State, because it's a huge role that you occupy there.
Well, I think I'm answering the question. Definitely feel free to redirect me if it's not.
I didn't really ask you a question. I rambled a little bit, so thank you for figuring this out. What I was trying to ask.
Yeah. I do think we live in a very interesting moment where I can't remember in my 50 years or plus on this planet there being a time where we were, as a nation and a society, more aware of our differences and the ways in which having conversations about those differences can make us all better. As you spoke to a very different North Shore community and a time in education where the pedagogy and the ways that people thought about teaching and taught teaching was very different. Even when we were in a room full of people who looked just like us, I think this moment in time has made us be aware that even when we think we're with a group of people who are just like us, often if we have a conversation that is meaningful, we realize that we can be very different. We can be different socioeconomically, gender-wise, and that we can be, religion, any number of dimensions. We can be very different, and the skills that we need as a society to be able to be welcoming to Black and Brown students, those are skills that can be really helpful in creating an environment for women. So I happen to have my first career in engineering where women historically had been grossly underrepresented. Many of the conversations that we have today around diversity have been very useful in dialogues around what does it take to have women feel comfortable in classrooms where science and math and engineering are taking place. So I think the part of me that was an engineer, even in this social space, is intrigued by the way that things work and the way that the the systems support or don't support each other. And so I have learned that by working in this space, what happens when we do this well and we desire to do it well is that it opens doors, not closes them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes people feel that having conversations around diversity is really bad. And I think we can be united around the things that make us, that we have in common, our nationality, our enthusiasm for our state. As we were talking before this interview, our favorite teams, right?
Right.
We can be very alike and have common things that unite us, and at the same time really celebrate the ways in which we are different, and also have a desire to help people when the ways in which they were different might be an impediment to them, right? So often when we're talking about black and brown students and issues that they face, we're also talking about the issues that white students who might be from really challenging socioeconomic circumstances might face. So I really became enthusiastic about the work in my career when I realized how broadly useful this work is, that it is really incredibly useful to a community to really think and talk about these important issues.
Which brings us to Salem State. Tell me about now the department that you work in as VP in terms of inclusion and diversity, because it's not just related to students, as I understand it.
Absolutely not. Our office is called the Office of Inclusive Excellence. It's a relatively, when you think about just the timeline for diversity officers, it's a relatively young department. And there are two formal members of the staff, myself and the director of education. But we work closely with a faculty fellow, and we have two graduate students and an undergraduate student all working in our area. Our work is about work at the intersections. So we collaborate around campus. I use this phrasing around creating spaces, where we create spaces for the conversations around diversity and difference in really important places. Whether it's a faculty or staff, and there's a recruitment of a position, we try to be part of the training and the conversation that improves the diversity of the pool of candidates that are available to us to choose from to fill different positions. With regard to the classroom space, we are partners with our faculty and our students in conversations around what it means to create classrooms that are welcoming and encouraging. And I think it's especially important in this COVID environment to have these dialogues around what it means to be welcoming, open, create a pathway when things aren't going well, where students can follow up with faculty and feel welcomed by the faculty, to ask clarifying questions, to when there are patterns of need or concern, be it technology or otherwise, we can respond to them and help those students. From a systems and strategy, everything from bias incident reports to our social media policy, any number of things my partner and I are responsible for everything from university training to being a partner in the search committee, a partner in the dialogue around what is it that we may have missed, what should we be considering, and how can we make our community a better one and stronger one and more collaborative one and more inclusive one. So we really do hit all three bins: the staff, the faculty, and the students in partnership.
That's amazing. How does someone, say I'm a staff member, and how does someone get involved in this, and whatever it is I might need? How do I go to you and say, what my problem is, or what I might need from you? Can you direct me in this direction? How does that work?
Absolutely. I think there are different channels that lead to our work. So if a department was in the process, and this has happened several times just in my short time since being on campus beginning in June, a department may be looking to fill a position, whether it's faculty or a staff position. They will reach out through email to our office and say, we're in the process of doing a search. We want to have as diverse a pool as possible. would you or a member of your office be available to consult with us around our posting? So they will ask us to take a look at everything from the linguistics to, are there recommendations about places we should advertise that we haven't given thought to as we seek to fill the position? On the opposite end of the spectrum, unfortunately, but this happens in any organization, there are things that people are not happy about, or they have a concern or a complaint about. And we have a bias incident report system that's set up that's confidential within the university as well. So if someone encounters something on campus that they perceive to be a bias incident, there is a confidential website through our departmental website where people can confidentially, privately reach out. We don't know any more information than they tell us. Sometimes they tell us more, sometimes they tell us less. They flag the concern, and it gives us an opportunity as an institution to then be accountable and to work within the different spaces where that may have whatever that incident or that concern happened on campus, to engage multiple members of the community in dialogue around the concern. And the incident process, I think, is really a phenomenal process just for accountability, because you don't want concerns to go into a black hole and people to lack confidence that if there was a concern or something didn't go as well as they would like for it to go, that there wasn't a constructive conversation about it. So it's everything from the daily emails in this case and not knocks on the door, all the way through formal complaints.
You've only, I'm saying it the wrong way. You've been at Salem State, what, since June?
Almost 6 months, roughly 6 months.
Okay.
Yes, since June.
And you came in at a really quiet time, you know, when things are going so smoothly. What is the stress doing to this job in terms of students, in terms of staff, in terms of your own position? Because it's hard to deal with people face to face.
Our work is very much people work. So when you think about the conversations that might need to happen, these are often sensitive issues. I think it's really tough to have those conversations via Zoom. It can be really tough to reach out. I think the whole country, all of us, right, would prefer in many cases to be having conversations like the conversations we're having today in person, and there's a real benefit to that. And we miss that human interaction. I think that absolutely makes our work much more challenging to do. Between COVID, the racial injustice issues and concerns that are going on, employment challenges, the economic challenges that so many families are being confronted with in an environment where so much is shut down. It has been really difficult. But I think we're all sharing in it out. It's not just inclusive excellence in the diversity work of the campus. It's really all of us and trying to figure out a way to get through it together.
You know, it's funny. I'm gonna ask you about what's the most gratifying part of what you do now here at Salem State, and it's a very short body of work. I understand that in terms of time, but something you just mentioned, something as little. I remember a particular student. I don't remember her name, but she got a 70 on an exam one time, and I wrote on that exam, "This is a refrigerator. You gotta go home and tell your mother that that's gotta go on the refrigerator because it's the first passing point you ever got." And the little accomplishment, it was like a little light bulb going on. And for me, it was like saying, you don't have to get an A, man, you're doing it. The kinds of things that you run into where someone may need just a piece of advice, or may need just to sit into a room where someone else is experiencing a similar thing. And you guys are providing that. And you're sort of like a helicopter looking down on the traffic to sort of see.
You broke up at the very end. Your voice distorted a little bit. I hope I'm coming through clearly.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just saying that small victories have to count when you're dealing with people. And I guess I am asking you, what's the most gratifying part of what you've done and seen and experienced at Salem State so far?
I'm incredibly humbled by the commitment to creating. Our faculty and staff are really aware of the challenges that our students are dealing with in this environment. Even before George Floyd's, murder this summer, we had faculty that were incredibly dedicated to the work of trying to create classrooms and other spaces on campus that were thoughtful about the challenges that students might be encountering when they walk in. You talk about making a little bit of progress at a time, right? Realizing that sort of you can't measure someone's capacity. You can measure in this moment how well someone did on a particular assessment. Mm-hmm. But to actually judge their potential is a really difficult thing. So to try to create opportunity and space and conversations that give students room to grow, I think that is part of the culture and tradition of many educators, including many of the educators at Salem State. And so when I have the privilege, and part of my work in the last few months is being on the listening circuit and to look at best practices and how can we showcase those or share some best practices that might be happening in one area with another area that might benefit from that best practice. I've been just so encouraged by there being no shortage of best practices that are happening in pockets, and really trying to think about how can we take that and magnify it and amplify it by sharing that with other people who might benefit from it. Students will benefit from it, but educators that will benefit from it as well.
I think the last question I have before I ask you what else you might want to talk about or mention, you're involved as a member of Salem Mayor Kim Driscoll's diversity task force. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm involved on the diversity task force. I'm on the subcommittee that is focused on economics. The economics piece is a fit for us because there's an education subcommittee that is focused heavily on K-12. The economic subcommittee connection for me as the representative of Salem State is really meaningful because as a education provider in the North Shore, it really is higher ed that provides, whether it's someone who's running their own company and looking for a class here or there that'll help them be more efficient, or it's a young person graduating from high school and thinking about college for the first time and wanting to get an education so that they can begin to chart their career or multiple careers over the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. Talking about Salem State and bringing the expertise and experience that I have in higher ed is really an important part of that economic development conversation. But of course, there's also the conversations about police, around just community, and really just the overall importance of diversity there. We're still really early phases of the actual real work, and I'm learning more about this community by virtue of being on that committee, but also looking forward to considering ways that we can help members of the community who might have found themselves on the outside looking in, be members of the community in more intentional ways, so that not only is it helpful and healthy for Salem State, but it's healthy for our business, our industries within the region.
Before we go, Sean, I want to mention Nicole Giambuso, who is the Public Relations Director at Salem State University, for setting this up twice for me. Full disclosure, yes. I screwed this thing up big time a couple of weeks ago. And finally, I think, again, before I ask you, to anything else here that you want to mention, in terms of that task force you were just talking about, not all the students, the young people you're going to talk with or deal with are going to go to Salem State or another college. But how important is that for you? No, how important is that for the task force to be listening to them?
As a diversity officer and a person who's worked in that space, I think all voices are critically important. If my career, means anything at all, it shows that you don't quite know what's around the corner. So I think, there's a conversation to be had to have everyone's voice heard, just in general, because I think if you're part of the community, your voice should be part of the work that goes on within that community. But particularly with regard to education, who knows what you will want to do,
Right.
or what need you might have in the next few years. So it's important to really make um, um, decisions with a longer vision in mind, and not just sort of tomorrow, but
Good.
several years moving
And
forward.
don't close any doors, man. Keep all the doors available. And
Absolutely.
you can close them, but don't
Absolutely.
lock them.
Absolutely.
I think it's remarkable that Salem State deals with kids, with adults, with people from all over the country, if not all over the world. Sometimes my students at Gloucester High School said, "Nah, I don't want to go to Salem State because it's in their own backyard." But I've talked with people from all over the country who attend. But there's that aspect of it, but also the fact that you're dealing with the community, I think is a real positive force. So I thank you for that, and thank you for obviously this interview. But Sean, is there anything else that you would like to mention that I haven't asked you about?
You know, I think my response today is very different from the response of a week ago. We're leading into the presidential elections, and the country is divided in so many ways. I think the most important thing I can share related to the work that I'm asked to do on a day-to-day basis is just to emphasize the importance um, of us all trying to listen and not think of our answer or our reaction or our response. To really be observers and listeners and think about what it means to build a community. And in building community, we may not all agree. Listening does not require you to agree with me or me to agree with you, but listening does provide an opportunity for us to create a common space to move forward. I think that is ultimately the spirit of diversity work when it is done best. And I think it is something that I want to continue to build on at Salem State. And I hope that this audience in the whole country really thinks about what it means for us to be different, but move together in constructive ways.